About this time last year, the city and the county just finished adopting their first ever comprehensive plans, which we spent 2 years on, working with a lot of you who are in the room and numerous people throughout the community to develop. And it has a list of strategies of things we can do in the community for the next 20 years. We tried to attack some of the low-hanging fruit right off the bat, and one of those things was to produce a housing needs assessment. There's no denying that Clarksville over the last 5 to 6 years has been in such an upward tick in development, more than we've seen just about in any point in our history. So we had to get a better handle on what is the type of growth we've seen, where's our community going. We know what the estimates say, we know what the Tennessee Data Center says. You can look at the census estimates every year. I mean, we're growing 5,000 to 6,000 people a year, both in the city and as well as in the county. A couple years ago, if you didn't know, we grew more than Metro Nashville. Clarksville was the #1 growing city in the state. And it's a badge we carry with pride, but it's also a burden for us. As a smaller city, you know, there's a lot of things we have to play catch up on. We have to have the services to go with it. And our housing, just like Nashville or Gallatin or Mount Juliet or Murfreesboro or Franklin, our housing has seen the same 60 to 80% increase in just the last several years, to the point where, and I've got a 16-year-old, I don't know where he's gonna live in 6 or 7 years. So we all know this. It comes up every month at City Council, the County Commission, and at the Planning Commission is affordable housing. So with us today, we do have Patrick Bowen, and I'll read a small bio about him and his company, and turn it over to him because he's the whole reason we're here today. Before I forget, we do have a lot of elected officials here today from the city and the county. We could spend 20 minutes going through all of you, but if you would, just raise your hand, all our city and county elected officials or any state elected officials we have. Thank you for coming out today. Thank you for taking an interest in this. I'd also like to thank Silas Matcham from the Planning Commission, silently in the back there. He was our program manager on this with Bowen as it was getting completed last year, and Michelle Austin with Clarksville Neighborhood Community Services. This was a collaborative effort between the Planning Commission and Neighborhood and Community Services, and we couldn't have done it without them and their input. So today we have Patrick Bowen, the founder and president of Bowen National Research. In 2010, after 14 years in the real estate research industry, Bowen and 8 others individuals were emboldened to, with a common purpose, launched Bowen National Research. Today the firm is nationally recognized with dozens of highly skilled and experienced real estate researchers and analysts. Affordable housing is personal to Bowen. Many years ago, he secured affordable housing to start life with his young family. It set him on a course to become a principal advocate in the housing industry as the owner of one of the nation's leading real estate research and analyst firms. He understands the important role that safe and affordable housing played in his own life and has committed himself and the efforts of his staff providing essential market research that helps secure affordable housing for others. Bowen National Research conducts real estate market analysis and a variety of housing and commercial development alternatives throughout the United States, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam, ranging from site-specific market feasibility studies to community-wide needs assessments. Our firm is experienced in working in both rural and urban markets with a national apartment database of near 100,000 properties, state-of-the-art geospatial capabilities, and comprehensive demographic and economic data. The firm is positioned to help others make well-informed and data-driven strategic decisions. So without further ado, Mr. Bowen.
All right, well, good afternoon. That's pretty good because he read that off his phone, and that is not easy. If anybody does have any visual challenges, I would recommend that you maybe move up. I know people don't typically want to do that. I did go through my slides on the screens here, and you know, I don't have great vision, and I could read it pretty well if I was about halfway back. So with that said, you have been warned. I try to make this as readable as possible. I'll do my best to get you out of here in a reasonable amount of time. I know dinner time's coming up for folks, but we do want to leave some time for question and answer afterwards. I have nowhere to go this evening, so I will stick around. So if anybody wants to come up to me and just talk to me individually, you certainly could do so. All right, so we were given a specific scope of work, and the focus was on Clarksville, but I didn't want to look at just Clarksville. I needed to understand what is around Clarksville and what's happening in the rest of the county, because as people make decisions on where they're going to live, where they're going to work, and things like that, they're going to compare Clarksville with the rest of the county. So we have it set up that way. You'll see Clarksville, or you're going to see references to PSA, meaning primary study area. So if you do see that, I'm talking about Clarksville. And then the balance of the county is the secondary study area. We looked at a lot of demographics, economics. Obviously, it's a housing study, so we looked at your housing inventory, both your rental and for sale housing supply. And then we come back with housing gap estimates, meaning here are the needs, numbers of units that are needed, whether it's rental or for sale, but at different affordability levels. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more as I get to those, but that's kind of the end result of the study. What are the needs of the community? And a lot of the stuff I'm going to present here today to you, you know some of this stuff, right? You know that you're growing. Okay, no shock. You know that you have a housing issue with affordability, availability, and things like that. But I think what the value of this study, especially having an outside firm come in, and we've done over about 120, 130 of these studies around the country, we bring to the table this experience of seeing other markets. What are they doing? What's happening with them? Growing, not growing, large senior base, large family base, whatever it might be. And so we bring that knowledge to us to kind of help you all understand what are we seeing. So I'll give some of your numbers in context of what I see elsewhere in the country. And then we conclude with some really broad recommendations on how you might want to move forward. The study has a lot of demographic information. I'm not going to cover all of these, but I want you to know, because depending on who you are, if you're a grant writer, a city official, the housing authority, somebody like that that's looking for specific details, this study is armed with quite a bit of information. Most of what I'm going to focus in on, and it'll just be a very few slides, will be on the households. Because to me, what I'm trying to look at is population is important, but what we want to understand is households, the housing unit, those people that live in there, whether it's one person or family of five or whatever it might be. The households drive housing demand. So as a household moves to this area, they're going to pick a housing unit. So you're going to see a lot of you're going to see a few slides on households here that I think are critical to understanding what's happening. And we do have data from 2010, 2020, 2024, and then projections up to 2029. So as Jeff said, you're going to see not just where you've been, which is you've all experienced it, but where are you heading with some of these demographics? So I start off with one of the most basic things that we look at, and that is households. Four different, and we'll just look at the graph itself, the line graph on the left-hand side, right-hand side. And total households from 2010 up through 2029. You've been growing a lot. You've added almost 12,000 households between 10 and 20. Between 20 and 24, you added about 7,700 households, and you're expected to add about another 7,600 households. So at a minimum, the city needs another 7,600 housing units just to tread water. And you don't want to tread water. You have some housing challenges here. You have some shortages. You have some quality issues. You have affordability issues. So you need more than that 7,600 units. But that's where we start. All right, so this is one of the key pieces too, as you start to understand, well, how as a community are we expected to change in terms of household sizes? So I have renter households on the top table, owner households on the bottom. This is households by size, so one person up to 5 person or larger. And where are most of your renter households? Well, in 2024 at least, most of them are 1 and 2 person households. Where are you expected to grow? Well, I put in green numbers at the bottom of each one of those tables. If anything is positive, and everything is growing. It doesn't matter which household size. A lot of communities we go into, they see growth in the 1 and 2 person households, but they're really not seeing it in the 3 person or larger, or maybe it's the 4 person households and larger. You are seeing it across the board. So that's a little bit different than most of the markets that we look at, even other high growth communities like yours. And so that's going to drive demand for certain type of housing to accommodate these smaller households. But again, you really need all types of units to accommodate these different renter household sizes, and the same thing for owner households. Most of your owner households are these smaller 1 and 2 persons, but that's where all your growth is expected over the next over that 5-year projection period. Another thing that we looked at, households by age group. So again, 3 different points in time. These are all Clarksville's numbers, not the county's. I do have the county numbers for all these data points. I show the rest of the county, but again, for this presentation, I'll just focus in on Clarksville. So it's 2020, 2024, 2029, and then at the bottom of the table, the change. Green numbers are positive, red numbers are negative. You have only one age group that's expected to decline, And much of that, keep in mind, this is not just people coming here, but a lot of this is people that are already here. This is a 5-year projection, so a lot of those people in that 25 to 34 age group, in the next 5 years, or at least that 5-year projection period, they're going to age up into the next group. And that next group is going to feed the next group in terms of people aging in place. So again, people are coming here of different ages, but you also have people that are aging here. And what's a little bit different, and that's again one of the values I think that we bring to this conversation, is that 35 to 44 age group. In the line bar graph, you can see most of your growth is in that 35 to 44 age group. That is unusual, right? That is not typical in most markets. But that says a lot about the desirability of this area for people to raise their kids here, to have families here. It speaks to your job market and opportunities that it's there for younger households, especially those wanting to start their family. So again, this is going to drive demand for a variety of housing, and there's no surprise on those last two age groups, that's 65 to 74 and the 75 and older, expected to add over 1,600 households. Again, a lot of that's people just aging in place here. Some of that is people relocating here as they retire. But the point to take away from this is you're going to have a notable increase in senior households. You're going to have to think about senior-oriented housing as well. This is renter household by income. Again, just Clarksville, 3 points in time. The change at the bottom, red is negative, green is positive. Where's all your growth expected? It's in those households that make $40,000 or more a year. So that in itself is going to drive demand for certain type of housing, rental housing. And look at the $60,000 and higher, how much that's going to grow. That is substantial. So as the community thinks, or developers are looking at opportunities in the city, you're going to see a need for higher end market rate. Now, one of the things I caution folks on is the reds. You would see that, and your natural inclination would be, we don't need affordable, attainable, call it what you will. We don't need lower income housing. That's not what this is saying. There's a lot of things that drive these changes. Some of it, I'll just give you a really fast example. This is incredibly complex, but I'll just show you one example. You could have two households making $35,000. Patrick Bowen and his now wife, but let's say I wasn't married yet, and so my wife makes $35,000. Over this 5-year projection period, we're going to get married, so we join as one household. Our income didn't go up individually, but joined together, we are now a $70,000 income household. So you're going to see some of that playing into this, that not necessarily these people are leaving, that some of this is assuming millennials are getting married and moving in together and their incomes are climbing. So I'll show you, if I do my job right, and the study should convey this, these lower income households, when you see what they have available to them and some of the housing challenges they face, there is a need for affordable, attainable housing as well, both for families and seniors. And then we did the same thing for owner households. Where's all the growth? It's $50,000 or more over the 5-year period, with most of it really substantially, most of it over 5,300 households making over $100,000 a year. So again, what type of for sale housing will be needed in Clarksville? It's going to be some pretty high-end homes prices, but nonetheless, there is still, you'll see here in just a few slides, the lack of homes that you have priced under $200,000. So even though there's a decline in these lower income households, those that are trying to be first-time home buyers on modest incomes, they don't have very much to choose from. It's rather remarkable how little affordable home sale product is available. All right, so now I want to just get you some understanding. Who's coming here? Well, let's just talk geographically, where are they coming from. On the left-hand side of that table is inflow counties, meaning this is the annual average of how many people come in from what counties. Any of those counties you see in red are your adjacent counties. That's why I flagged those. I just want to understand regionally where people are coming from. But then you've got, probably no surprise, Davidson County, the Nashville area, the second most common place where people are coming from. Cumberland County, North Carolina. What's down there? Fort Bragg. You got a lot of military people that are relocating here. In fact, same for Liberty County, Georgia. That seems like an odd one. Nope. Fort Stewart. People coming up here. So you have two things going on. You have people, some people regionally coming here. You got people likely getting priced out of the Nashville market in part. But then you also have the military influence in terms of how many people are coming up here. So you can see geographically how you're being impacted by the people that move here. Now this one here, I'm gonna do these really fast. This is median household income. Let me back up 1 second. Yep. I think I have some more migration stuff here in a second. But here's people that are living here. This is median household income. Darker blues are the higher incomes. So you can see where they live. Lower incomes, closer to the downtown and the campus. This is younger population, so younger adults, ages 20 to 34. Where are they? Again, downtown, near the campus, and up near the military base on the northwest side. And then this is where your older adults, age 55 and older, mostly in that southern 2/3 of the county, the city. All right, so this is getting back to, I was talking about people moving into this area. A lot of data on this table, 2 points I wanted to make, and so I marked those in the red boxes. And so one, you have natural change, and these are 2 different sets, all from Montgomery County, it's not Clarksville, 2010 to 2020, and then 2020 to 2023. And I marked natural change, that means births versus deaths. And what's the net difference? And so you can see, really, if you took anything from 2010 up to all the way to 2023, you've added about 26,000 people. Believe it or not, we are studying a lot of markets in the United States. That number is declining. And there's places like West Virginia. It's not a bad perception of West Virginia, but West Virginia is really struggling to hold on to its young people. So they leave many of their cities and areas, and all they have, at least the majority of the people that are left, are older adults, and they're not having kids. So these communities not holding on to their young people, and then very few people are having kids in those markets. And so they're really having a tough time having any kind of positive population growth. You don't have that problem here. You've got a lot of young people coming here. You got a lot, in theory, a lot of these folks should continue to have kids, raise their families, so you're going to have that positive change there. Then on the far right-hand side, you got a lot of people moving here. So you've got the perfect storm. You got people that are here having kids, which again is not that common and not that large of a number. And then you've got a lot of people coming here in significant amount, and that is adding to your population and ultimately your household numbers. All right, so who moves here? I just marked on the right-hand side of that table in red. It says 2018 to 2022. It's a 5-year census average, but it's basically saying the year 2022, which would be the latest we had when we did this study, 75% of the people who move here are under the age of 35. Again, that's not typical what we see, but again, speaks volumes to why younger people want to come here. In fact, a lot of the communities that we study, if it's the age 55 and older, where we're seeing a lot of influx, people moving into the southern states to retire, things like that. But again, these are people moving in. This is Clarksville only. People moving in, I marked on the right-hand side, people coming from outside the county. This is incomes. So when they come here, what jobs did they take? Well, you can see they take a lot of different paying jobs, but about a third of them, with the biggest share of any of these, would be those 2 I highlighted in that orange or yellow color. That's people that make anywhere from $25,000 up to $50,000 a year. Now, keep in mind, that's one person, that's not a household, so you could have a second income in that household. But these are people that make moderate to fairly decent incomes that come into this area to work. So younger people, mostly regional, some from the military areas, but taking many of these middle-paying jobs. All right, here's one that folks probably aren't aware of. You have about 45,000 people that work in the city. 25,000 don't live here. 25,000. So more than half of the people that work in your city are not residents of your city. Why does that matter for housing? What does that mean? Well, one, we know, we didn't survey your residents or your commuters, but we've surveyed about 10,000 people in the last 2 years, markets all over the country, mostly east of the Mississippi. And we've learned, when we ask the question of people commuting into their community where they work, would you live there? Would you live where you work if the opportunity existed and housing was available and affordable to you? And typically the answer is about 40%. People said, yes, I would move there if housing was available and affordable to me. So you have 25,000 people that come here, maybe not even 40%, maybe it's 1%. You still have a notable amount of people that will live in this community if housing was available and affordable to them. But you're going to see in just a moment, you don't have very much housing available, and you don't have very much that would be affordable to even people of modest incomes. And for those that are, and I suspect most of you are here because you care about housing in some capacity. But one of the things I try to articulate to communities, if housing was not a priority, but the job market is, the economy is, then housing needs to be a priority. Because when you have these people come into your community and earn their wages, short of them maybe buying lunch, getting gas, running some basic errands, they take most of those earnings back out of this area, right? And that's not good for a community. You want them to earn it here. You want them to spend it here. And so you've got a lot of people that can't stay here even if they wanted to live here. And housing plays a role in that. I don't normally put this in a presentation. The bullseye thing on the left-hand side is basically showing you what direction are people coming from when they commute into this area. So most are coming from the southeast or east. All those little purple dots are basically showing you where your people that work here, where do they come from? And so you can see a lot of those dots, hopefully it comes across on the screen there. But a lot of people coming from the south, southeast, some traveling long distances. I don't know that you can read that little red outline box at the bottom left, so I put it in a bubble box there towards the bottom center. You have about 8,600 people that commute 50 miles every day to work in your city. 50 miles every day. Now, why does that matter for housing? Well, again, think about housing and why people choose to live where they choose. We know from surveying employers, we've surveyed a couple thousand employers around the United States. And one of the things we've learned from employers is they're having a tough time holding on to their workforce. It used to be attracting, we always heard that in the news, especially right after COVID. Employers having a tough time attracting people to come to their place of employment. Now, and that's still that is a top answer when we do our surveys, but now retaining employees, that's climbing the charts. Well, that's number 2. So employers are having a tough time holding on to employees because of housing. We didn't ask them about other things of why they don't stay. It's housing, it's driving that. So these long distances of commuters coming here, it poses a risk for your employers in terms of trying to keep the workforce there that they have and not having turnover, because that in itself adds cost to local businesses. All right, so commuters that come in, I wanted to just show you really quick. Again, I marked in the red box just those that are coming into the area. Their ages in those peach colored rows, more than half are between the ages of 30 and 54. And then we have monthly wages, over the biggest share at least, over 41%, make over $3,300 a month, which equates to over $40,000 a year. So again, middle to younger age people and making a decent income over $40,000 a year that come here, but don't stay here, and housing is part of that reason. You all know your job market's we looked at your job market, it's been growing with the exception of unemployment, which is the left-hand graph, where it climbed up in 2020. You're back down below 4% the last few years. And then your job growth has been just remarkable, again, with the exception of 2020. So you have some positive, and we looked at a lot of other economic indicators. I'm going to show you wages here in a second and what that means for housing. But a lot of positive economic activity here, and again, it's one of the reasons, if not the reason, why you're growing as much as you are. All right, so now this will be the first thing I have on housing. So I'm going to show you what your rental housing stock looks like. Do you have anything available? I'll show you the for sale housing market. But I want to talk about the people that live here in Clarksville. And so one of the things that we look at is people living in what is classified here as substandard housing. These will be federal definitions, meaning either people that live in overcrowded housing, which you do have some of those, but believe it or not, in the United States, we have people that live in units that lack complete indoor plumbing or kitchen facilities. And Clarksville is no different. So you have about almost 1,800 overcrowded housing units, 424 that lack complete kitchen or plumbing facilities. So 2,200, roughly 2,200 households living in with substandard housing. So as this community looks forward, not only building housing, you are going to need additional housing. You do need to think about preserving what you have, or replacing this existing housing stock, because again, some people are living in housing that they shouldn't be in. Now, part of that reason, you'll see in a second, is because there isn't much for people to choose from. So they're forced to live in these housing conditions. The same thing for housing affordability. So I have two sets of numbers on here, one in the red box, housing cost burden. Again, this is a federal definition, meaning people pay over 30% of their income towards housing. That's considered high. But it's that, orange colored box, severe housing cost burden. Those are people that pay over half. I repeat, these are people that pay over half of their income towards their housing cost. I don't know if there's anybody in this room that pays over half of their income. Maybe there is, but it's probably a very small number. But yet you have 8,000, over 8,400 renters and owners combined that pay over half their income towards housing costs. Nobody wants to do that. Why do they do that? Well, you see, one, you're going to see the wages here in a second and the housing cost. but you don't have enough housing for these people to move into that they can afford. So they're forced to live in this type of housing. And again, that's not a healthy thing for a community. And again, if housing's not a priority, but you worry about the economy and the workforce and the employers, keep in mind this: when you've got 8,400 households in your city that pay over half their income towards their housing costs, what they got left to spend at your stores for just, disposable income? How about your restaurants? Things that drive the economy, those folks are really pinching pennies and they can't contribute to a growing economy. All right, so one of the things that we did is we surveyed multifamily apartment properties. This is just Clarksville's numbers: 89 multifamily apartments, almost 11,000 units. This is where we talked to property managers, leasing agents, and so forth. 357 of them vacant. We broke those out by market rate, tax credit, and I'll talk about those specifically, what tax credit is and government subsidized. But basically, tax credit and government subsidized housing is anything that's classified as affordable, attainable. Generally serves people that make up to about 80% of median income. I'll talk about what that income is in a second. So the affordable stuff you can see on that table, it's full. Everything we surveyed is full. Now, we didn't survey everything, but we got much of what's in the city. The only, again, market rate was the only thing that had anything available, but even it is at 96.3% occupancy. Your overall market, 96.7. Is that high, low, good, bad? But for a healthy housing market, you want vacancies. You want vacancies so people, as their lives change, they get married, divorced, somebody passes away, somebody wants to downsize, people have kids, somebody wants to relocate to this area. You want vacancies to accommodate those housing changes or needs, and you only have those in the market rate side, and even those are bordering on a shortage of housing. So very high occupancy rate, minimal availability, especially for the affordable stuff. And the other thing I want to show on here is this is now the same product, and we'll just focus on the top half of that table for Clarksville. And the wait list, it's the fourth column over, percent of those properties that have wait list, 60% of the tax credit, 100% of the government subsidized, and almost 20% of the market rate have wait lists. So there's pent-up demand for this type of housing. Now, on the right-hand side, that last column there, property level waiting list, not every property gave us the number. Normally, I would tell you I'd have that number, but for some reason, property managers didn't want to disclose that specific number here in Clarksville, but I normally get that. But what we do know is there's likely several hundred households waiting to get into this type of housing. One of the tax credit projects, and I marked it on there, its wait is up to 5 years. 5 years to get in one of those. What's the chances that whoever's on that wait list will be around to want that unit in 5 years? So you can see there's significant pent-up demand for all types of housing, but particularly that affordable stuff. These I'll go through really fast. This is really for developers in the room or realtors that want to understand some of the activity that's going on. This is all the market rate product by bedroom and bathroom configuration, and with the exception of those studio units at the top, they have a 39% vacancy rate. That's one property, and studio units are hard to rent generally in most markets. But nonetheless, everything else is pretty low in terms of occupancy, so every bedroom type is doing well. One of the things I did notice on here, you have the one bedrooms. If I take the one bedroom to the two different ones I have on here, you have about 18% of your units are one bedroom. That is low for a community. You want that to be about 35%. So your one bedroom units for developers in a room, and keep in mind, where's all your growth? 1 and 2 person households, renter households. You do need more smaller units, but nonetheless, you really need a little bit of everything. And the only other thing I wanted to point on here is in the bottom right-hand side, if y'all can read that, that's vacancies for these market rate units. Of anything built between 2020 and 2024, vacancy rate 7.7. Remember, you want to be like 4 to 6% vacant. That's just, you had a bunch of new product that when we called, they were in their initial lease up. So if I took those out, your overall vacancy rate would drop dramatically. So it's just the newer product has some vacancies, but they were leasing up rather quickly when we surveyed them. Here's the tax credit product. Tax credit serves households to make generally $40,000 to $64,000 a year. Everything's full. Everything has a wait list. I mentioned the 5-year wait at one of the properties. You have very few one bedrooms among these unit types as well. So if anybody's doing affordable tax credit rentals or wants to explore this community, we work with a lot of tax credit developers. This would be certainly a market that I would say go look at Clarksville. Their workforce needs affordable housing. Their seniors need affordable, attainable housing. This is government subsidized, so generally, again, there's a lot of rules to which households they serve, but generally for your area, this would serve people that make less than $40,000 a year. I showed you before, everything's full. You have wait lists. And again, you have very few one-bedroom units. And then just list everything we collected on the apartments, probably irrelevant to most people in this room, but we wanted to show the development community we do have a lot of information at our disposal, so as you start to look at properties specifically, we can share some of that data with you. All right, so if you can't rent an apartment, what else can you rent? These are what we call non-conventional rentals. And so it's a single-family home, a mobile home, duplex, a unit over a storefront, anything that's not an apartment. We want to be aware of it. You have about 18, almost 19,000 of these units in the city. My staff is exceptional at what they do, and they found 393 of these available. Okay, we got some vacancies, 393. That feels like a lot. Well, if I compare that to that almost 19,000 units, you come back with a vacancy rate of 2.1%. Again, you want that to be 4 to 6%. So even in this market segment, where it looks like we have 393 of these units available, that should meet our market need, you are so far below what you need to have. The other thing I wanted to point out is those average rents on the next to the last column on the right. And you could see the bulk of the units are 3 bedrooms, and they start at least the average rents at $1,750. So these are pretty high rents, and it would be a tough time for a lot of the low to moderate income households to be able to afford this product. On the flip side of that, though, it does show the development community, hey, we can get some healthy rents in this market. So if I did want to build market rate housing, you are going to have growth among these moderate to higher income renter households. There's an opportunity to achieve some healthy rents here. All right, how about home sales, 2020 to 2024? This is annual sales. The blue bar shows how many homes were sold each year. And so you can see they were climbing up through 2022. And then what happened in 2022 with the home market? Interest rates. And since 2020, your home prices grew by $92,000, a 44% increase. I'm going to predict that very few people saw a 44% increase in their wages since 2020. If you did, I would like to talk to your company and see if they would hire me. All right, this is home sales, again, just for Clarksville. Well, actually, it's Clarksville PSA. It's in the dark blue compared to the SSA, which was the rest of the county, which is that royal blue. Where was the most of the sales activity by home price? It's in that $200 to $299 price point, and then that $300 to $399,000 price point. Very little activity priced under $200,000. And by the way, we cut this up so many different ways in the study. I just want to show you one of the key things. We do it by bedroom type, year built, other ways. So you get to kind of see what are all the things triggering home sales activity and why people get the prices they can get or not. This is probably something you are aware of, but maybe you didn't know the degree. So this is the available homes. Again, the city's in the dark blue, the rest of the county is in the royal blue. Where's most of your available product? This would have been about third quarter of last year when we pulled all this information. It was in that $200,000, $299,000, and that $300,000 to $399,000 ranges. Look at what you have under $200,000. 18 houses. You know, a few years ago, I think most of us would agree that first-time home buyer homes are probably in that 175 range, 190, somewhere around there. Those days are gone, right? Most markets, so it's not a Clarksville problem, but most markets that we study, you're in the mid-200s now for that first-time home buyer product. And so, nonetheless, for those that are on modest incomes and want to get into a home, you've got 18 houses in the city that they got to choose from. And what's the odds they're going to find exactly what they need? The bedroom types, the location, the school district, whatever it might be. And so it poses a challenge for those folks. And when you have a home price under $200,000, it's not universally true, but I'd say there's a good chance that those homes have some quality issues, maybe insulation, weatherization issues. There'll be additional cost. So you might be able to afford that home, but then you've got additional cost to get that home up to decent living standards. The other thing I want to mention, I have it in the blue box at the top. So there's 526 homes available. Again, when I compare that to all owner-occupied housing units, you have what we call an availability rate. So it's like a vacancy rate for the apartments. You have an availability rate of 1.4. You want that to be, for a healthy market, about 2 to 3%. So even on the for sale side, you're below where you really need to be considered a healthy, vibrant housing market. And I know a lot of these data points that I'm sharing with you could sound discouraging, right? We have a shortage of housing. It's not affordable. We have people living in low quality housing. Okay, one, you are no different than just about every city we study. But two, what this is an indicator is there are so many opportunities for development in this community. And I'll show you the housing gap numbers in a second. That you could build almost anything in this city, and you should do well if it's a good product in the right location, things like that. So a lot of opportunity coming out of this study. All right, this is probably the toughest slide to see. So the folks in the back, I'm going to get you through this. What I wanted to do here was I wanted to show your typical wages, and I had to do this in 2 slides. Even 1 slide's hard to read, but I cut this in 2 slides. These are the most common occupations you all have. So we didn't pick these randomly. These are the top 35, right? I picked 35? Yep, 35 occupations for your area. And so these are the occupations that drive much of your economy. So what we wanted to understand was what are the wages these people make, which is, again, in those columns there, you can read it, annual wages. And I made the retail salesperson's row a little bit bigger, so hopefully you can see that. So at the lower quartile, I mean the bottom fourth of those wage earners make about $23,000, median, the midpoint, almost $29,000. What can they afford to rent? Anywhere from $576 to $722. What can they afford to buy? $76,000 or $96,000. If you look on the left-hand side, on the white box, the red lettering, I put in there fair market rent. That's a 2-bedroom fair market rent, $1,200, $1,246. That's the government's number to say that's what a typical 2-bedroom should be in this area. If you look down those columns that I had for the renters, what they can afford to buy, anything in red is below that $1,246, meaning those workers can't afford a typical 2-bedroom in this market. And in some cases, you'd have to double, and maybe even a couple of these, especially at the lower quartile, you'd have to triple them before those people could afford to rent a typical 2-bedroom. And then I also had on the left-hand side the median list price for what you have available. These are the homes that we found, $315,000. The right-hand side, nobody's close. Now, one caveat, one caution to this whole thing, that's one wage earner. That's one retail salesperson. And we know most households many have 2 wage earners. But what this is telling you is you better have a second wage earner. You better have another source of income. For these workers, the challenge for them to find affordable rental and for-sale housing is daunting, particularly on the home ownership side. And so that's why I wanted to show that because, and again, this is not a Clarksville problem. This is a national challenge. These are the rest of the occupations that we have, a little bit more with some black in here, but for the most part, these are the wage earners, and this is what they can afford to rent or buy. So there is a disconnect between the wages and the housing cost for this area. And then you all have had a lot of residential building activity. This is building permits on the left-hand, that bar graph. So you've been building a lot of units. When we pulled everything that we did and submitted the draft report last fall, towards the end of last fall, you had a lot of multifamily apartments coming. You had some townhomes, for sale townhomes. You had a lot of single-family lots that were being developed. So you have product coming, but you got so much growth. You got to keep it going. Even in those peak years of 2021 and 2022, where you had over 3,000 units, you got to keep pace, right? Because you've got so much growth, as Jeff said in the introduction, and I showed here. All right, so these are the housing gap numbers. And did rentals on top, for sale on the bottom. In the study itself, I don't show it in this table because I didn't have enough room. In the study itself, you'll see the incomes that tie to these, but I wanted to show it what most of us would process, and that is the rents. So the lowest income and the lowest rents are in the top part of that rental table, and as you go down, halfway down, you'll see the highest income and the highest rents. And you can see this is a little bit different than a lot of markets that we go into. There's not much deviation between the needs for the lowest income households and the highest income households. So again, one of the biggest takeaways for me was you need a lot of different type of product in terms of affordability. And the same is true on the for sale side. Again, the lowest numbers on that, the home price is under $133,000, which would be almost impossible for anybody to develop that kind of product. But you can see where the larger gaps are, and it's really that stuff that starts at about $214,000 and higher. So again, a big need. 8,500, almost 8,600 for sale housing units needed over the next 5 years, almost 6,600 rentals. Now that's if you want to solve everything. And if you guys would pull that off, that would be remarkable. So it's a target, it's a goal. What you want to use this for is to help set priorities, to start facilitating conversations of where do we want to focus our efforts as a community, where do we want to put our resources, what kind of developers do we want to get into our community, And this would help at least start to have some structure to that dialogue. And we're good on time, so this will be the last slide I have, other than my contact information. Common sense stuff, right? Set realistic, attainable goals, both short and long term. You now have numbers to point to. So versus, people getting together and say, hey, we need to start building more of this type of housing or that, you now have something to point to. And not just what we had in those housing gap numbers, but there's examples in the study that we have or provide data on seniors, right? You have a notable growth among seniors ages 65 and older. Is that an area of focus? You have all that growth in that 35 to 44 age group. Do we need to focus on families? Do we need to focus on lower income households and all these other segments that we sliced up? You have something to look at versus just thinking we have a need. You now know some of the targets. And the same is true for even the quality of some of the housing. I showed you the substandard housing numbers. Is a goal, is a priority for the community to start thinking about investing, and it's not to say you haven't, but to reinvest in the existing housing stock to preserve what you have for the long term. So you have numbers to look at to get you there. From my understanding, y'all don't have any kind of a formal housing committee, housing coalition, housing task force. And here's where, Jeff, he said in the beginning, and I didn't take offense to this, he said, hey, getting a housing study was a low-hanging fruit. Well, first off, this is hard. This is really hard to put this together, but I knew what you meant. But here, to me, this is a low-hanging fruit. Like, where do we start? And this is where communities fail, time after time. Because you're here because you care about housing. You have a study that says you need housing, and this is the type is needed. Who's leading that effort? Is that a city or county government issue? I don't think it is. I mean, they need to be part of it, but you need to organize as a community. And again, there's a lot of ways to do that, and I can give suggestions, examples of other communities, but somebody has to spearhead your housing efforts to say, okay, these are our priorities. Now let's go to the elected officials and other decision makers to say this is what we think we should be doing as a community. So and you can hire somebody, that would not be me. You could hire somebody to come in and under contract and work with you to set plans, look at financing, all kind of stuff. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but somebody has to be, as I often call, a housing champion for the community. Maybe that person or persons is in this room. We did not look at any of your policies or land use plan or any of that stuff, but there's a lot of things that communities around the country are doing to try to incentivize and encourage housing of all different types, so there's certainly some dialogue that should be had there. Formulating education outreach campaign, well, this is part of it. It's not a part of a larger campaign, but it should be. You should have some structure to communicating to the community. One of the things that I suspect you all thought housing might have a role in the economy, hopefully today you have a little bit better understanding of why does this matter for our local economy. And that's the kind of message, to me, if I was in charge, I would want to get out to the community. To say, because look, I don't know your politics, I don't know what the citizens, the political winds of the community is, but I know it's out there where people, we don't want more growth, we don't want this type of housing. But if people could be educated on the circumstances people are in, the living conditions, spending more than half of their income towards their housing costs, I mean, how many people know that? The impact it's having on the employers. We didn't survey them, but I can tell you if we surveyed your employers, they'd have a challenge here holding on to their workforce and attracting workers. So there's many, many more. You could package a very good message to say, look, housing matters. Let us educate you on that. And there's other events you could do, marketing material, all kind of things. Encouraging development partnerships. There's a lot of groups that can come to the table. I will mention one that's not commonly referenced, and that is employers. Look, employers are bringing the jobs, and so that's a good thing, right? And we have learned through surveys that we've done with employers, some of them want to be part of the solution. So to me, I would have employers at the table having this conversation because your housing decisions are going to impact them. And so they do have a vested interest in a healthy housing market. And then the last thing, again, is just kind of a broad thing, that is marketing the opportunities here. There's a lot of good data in here. We work with developers all over the United States. I guarantee you I'm going to be telling about Clarksville. Go to Clarksville, look at what's happening down there and see if there's an opportunity to do something to help that community with housing. So I'll leave it at that. This is my contact information. Again, I'm going to answer questions now, but I'll stick around afterwards if you want to talk with me.